Happy Wisdom Wednesday, everyone. So this week's book of the week is a bit of a textbook, but more importantly, I'm going to start focusing a lot of my weekly videos on lessons. And this one is a lesson on the subtle art of shutting the hell up and learning how to listen. See, a while back, one of the people who mentored me early in my career was a gentleman named Ken Husted, who I spoke to many years ago, and I asked him, I said, hey Ken, if there's one thing you could have your salespeople learn, what would it be? And I thought it might be objection handling, or perhaps asking better questions, right? We always learn that in sales, right? Know how to ask good questions because you can show that you understand your prospect, and it shows how smart you are. He actually surprised me. He said, I would want them to learn how to listen. Now, Ken is from the South like myself, and of course he's full of fantastic proverbs. A lot of them I like to call Ken Hustedisms. And one of them was, so you can only listen with 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? There's a reason for that. And so this book called Messages, the Communication Skills Books, I actually read it a while back, and it inspired me to write an article on it specifically about listening, because it's not as simple as we make it to be. It should be, but there's always a lot of things and obstacles in our mind that prevent us from active listening. Now, something to consider when you think about listening is that aside from the fact that it is a skill set, it's also a compliment. One of the things that I've read about Bill Clinton is that when he would meet with somebody, whether it was on a campaign trail or in the White House, he always made that person feel like they were the only person in the world. He had that power. And some of the great leaders, I've always heard that about them, that they made you feel like you were the only person in the world at that moment. So it's definitely a skill and also a compliment. But there are 2 types of listening. There's real listening and there's pseudo-listening. So let's look at what real listening is about. There's 4 key areas when it comes to real listening. You're either trying to understand someone, you enjoy someone, you're trying to learn something new, or you're seeking advice or solace. If you think about it, when you're really listening, it falls into one of those categories. Now, what about pseudo-listening? Well, there's actually many ways we pseudo-listen, where we think we're listening and we're not, and you can take a look at it here. And you don't have to memorize this whole list. The best way to think about pseudo-listening when you're really not listening is that the intent isn't behind actually listening. The intent is behind trying to meet one of our own personal needs. For example, trying to mind read and think about what the other person is saying, or buying ourselves time so we can prepare what we're about to say. Whenever we do that, we're technically pseudo-thinking. So here is a very simple way for you to approach listening, and if you follow these steps, I promise you, you will improve your ability to listen and, of course, improve your relationships, whether they are professional or personal. Now, I'm going to put this book down for a moment and show you. So first, you have to engage with eye contact. Very simple, right? So make sure you're actually looking and paying attention to the person. Keep in mind, minimal eye contact is good. You don't want to be staring somebody in the eye the whole time. What you want to do is maybe look at their eyes, perhaps look at their forehead or their side of the ears, but maintain good eye contact. The second thing is, it's always good to lean slightly forward. You know, body language is very important. So when you're listening to somebody, if you're standing up, you can kind of lean in a little bit, listen in, or if you're sitting down, lean in, because you're leaning into them. You're coming into their world, right? And keep in mind, keep a little personal space, especially with COVID-19. We have to stay 6 feet apart. But even when you're 6 feet apart, look, I'm quite far away from you. If you're pretend that you're telling me something, if you see me go like this, there's an indication in your brain that I'm actually listening, because you're physically seeing me. Lean in to listen to the message. The third thing is always to help the speaker along. A lot of times people don't have a lot of confidence in what they're telling you. But more importantly, regardless of that, we always look for cues in our body language. So while you're listening, go ahead and nod your head. Because by nodding your head, you're allowing the person to move along. This is a neuro-linguistic programming tactic. By nodding, you're slowly encouraging the person along. And even if the person, whatever they're telling you, it's their story, it's their message, we still like to have positive reinforcement as human beings. So while we're listening, just kind of leaning forward, keeping minimum eye contact and nodding. Now, a lot of times, and this is a tip, my own tip, we like to do this while we're thinking. But this is kind of a defensive move, because we're essentially covering the most sensitive area of our body, which is the gut. The best part is take your hands, put them in a prayer, right? And just kind of hold them like this, right? Maybe keep them down, down below, but more importantly, don't tighten up, because think about it. People, human beings, they mimic each other. So if we are tightening up, that's what's going to happen with the other person. The fourth thing is to essentially paraphrase and repeat back like what you're hearing. And one thing I'm going to pull is this book called Persuasion Engineering by Richard Bandler and John Laval. This is a neurolinguistic programming sales book. But one of the things they talk about when it comes to paraphrasing is not just simply repeating back exactly what the other person says. You have to really engage all senses. So not only repeat back what they say, use the same hand gestures that they make. If they talk about something and they use a circular hand gesture, paraphrase, repeat back what they said to confirm the message, but also use the same hand movements and body movements. The fifth thing is actually asking questions, but ask questions to clarify. Dig a little bit deeper in some of the details, right? And make it meaningful. Because of course, when you start asking questions, it shows that you're paying very close attention to what this person is telling you. The sixth one is a very simple one. It's just moving away from distractions. So if you are listening to someone, especially in person, try and move away from distractions. If you're on Zoom, get rid of any distracting things in the background. You know, even if you have to cue them and say, excuse me, let me move to a room where it's more quieter so I can listen to you, go ahead and do that. And the last one is you have to make a commitment to really listening to what the other person's saying, even if you're upset, sad, angry, emotional. And this is very useful when it comes to our personal relationships, but especially our professional relationships. Many times we might have a disagreement with a colleague, a disagreement with our boss, maybe somebody who's reporting to us. We have to take those emotions aside, because if we focus on those emotions, now the intent is behind what we're most interested in, and so we're not listening to the other person. We're listening to ourselves because we're trying to do something that's selfish. So the intention has to be there. You have to get your emotions out of it. If you have to delay a conversation so you can actively listen, go ahead and do it. It's better to delay it than to do it right then and there while you're emotional and upset and focusing on what you want and what's in your head versus what the other person is telling you. So everyone, that's the book of the week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Some of you may not know this, but I actually have a podcast. Some of the books and articles I've written that people really love to ask me if I could record myself reading through some of these articles. So I'm actually going to record a podcast on this. You can check the links below, or just look up Mindloom with Omar M. Khatib on any podcasting platform, Spotify, iTunes, etc. And just subscribe. I'll be recording a podcast perhaps in the next few days and setting it up. So that's your book of the week, your lesson of the week. Happy Wisdom Wednesday, and as always, be safe, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.